My stepsister stole my dad's watch, framed me, and got away with it, until Grandpa exposed her in the most epic way. 4 years ago, when I was 17, my life took a turn I never could have imagined. My relationship with my dad had always been rocky, to say the least. My stepsister, then 16, was the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was the outsider constantly walking on eggshells around my dad and stepmom. My stepsister's hatred for me was unprovoked, but she went out of her way to make my life miserable. Her mom, my stepmom, didn't just enable her behavior, she often joined in. Anytime there was conflict, my dad would side with them, no questions asked. I quickly learned that no one in that house was on my side, so I withdrew, trying to stay out of their way. But apparently, my silence only made me more of a target. One day, my dad's prized watch went missing. It wasn't just any watch, it was extremely valuable, both financially and sentimentally. I didn't even know it was gone until I came home from school and found my dad furious, my stepmom glaring at me, and my stepsister putting on an Oscar-worthy performance of innocence. Before I could even figure out what was happening, my stepmom accused me of stealing the watch. She claimed I'd been acting strange lately, desperate for attention, and my stepsister backed her up with a made-up story about seeing me snooping around my dad's room. I was blindsided. The strange behavior they mentioned was me mourning the loss of my childhood cat, who had been my only comfort during my parents' divorce. My stepsister had made cruel jokes about how much better the house felt without my ugly creature, reducing me to tears during a few family dinners. Instead of comforting me, my dad told me to stop being so emotional. Now, they were using my grief against me, painting me as some attention-seeking thief. I tried to defend myself, but my dad wouldn't listen. He called me a lunatic, just like my mom, and kicked me out on the spot. I had no plan, no money, and nowhere to go except to my mom's house. For the next 4 years, my dad never reached out, not to apologize, not to check in, nothing. I tried multiple times to contact him and clear my name, but he ignored every attempt. Meanwhile, I poured my energy into rebuilding my life. I graduated high school, then college, and focused on taking care of my mom, who needed a lot of emotional support. My dad's absence hurt deeply, especially during milestones like graduation, but over time, the pain became easier to bear. Fast forward to a few weeks ago, my grandpa turned 75 and invited the whole family to his birthday party. Despite everything, I couldn't say no. Grandpa and I had always been close, he had supported me financially when I was kicked out and was my biggest cheerleader. I wanted to celebrate with him, even if it meant facing my dad, stepmom, and stepsister again. Walking into that party was like stepping back into a nightmare. Seeing my dad sitting with my stepmom and stepsister like nothing had happened made my stomach churn. I kept my distance, sticking to other relatives and avoiding them as much as possible. My stepsister wouldn't even look at me, while my stepmom wore a smug expression that made my blood boil. I was holding it together until something completely unexpected happened. Toward the end of the party, the guests started chanting for Grandpa to give a toast. He stood up, thanked everyone for coming, and reminisced about his wonderful memories with each person there. But then, out of nowhere, he brought up my dad's missing watch. Grandpa revealed that he had recently discovered the truth about what happened to it. He explained that a week prior, he had been talking to an old friend who owns a pawn shop. During their conversation, the missing watch came up, and his friend remembered someone selling a very similar watch a few years back. Grandpa showed him a picture of the watch, and his friend immediately recognized it. It turned out that the person who sold the watch was none other than my stepsister. Not only did the pawn shop owner take down her name and ID, but she had also confessed to him that she was selling the watch to cover car repair expenses after a drunken accident. She even bragged that her mom was helping her pin the theft on me to avoid getting in trouble. Grandpa told the entire room this story, leaving everyone in stunned silence. My dad's face went pale, my stepsister froze, and my stepmom looked like she'd seen a ghost. Grandpa explained that he had debated revealing the truth earlier but decided to wait until the party so he could clear my name in front of everyone and hold them accountable. As Grandpa finished his toast, I felt a flood of emotions, anger, sadness, and vindication all at once. For 4 years, I had carried the pain of being falsely accused and betrayed by my own family. Now, the truth was finally out, but instead of feeling relief, I just felt numb. I couldn't stick around for the fallout. As everyone stared in shock at my dad, stepmom, and stepsister, I quietly left the party. I didn't want to see their reactions or deal with whatever drama was about to unfold. I needed space to process everything. Walking out of that party, I felt a strange mix of validation and heartbreak. I had waited so long for the truth to come out, but it didn't erase the years of pain and betrayal. My name was cleared, but the scars of what they did to me will take a long time to heal. I just felt empty. My grandpa came over to my place the next morning to check on me. He was genuinely worried that he had done something wrong by bringing up my family drama in front of our entire family and his friends, but I assured him I was very grateful for what he did for me. He told me that he understood how I might be feeling and advised me not to rush into any decision regarding my father. He said he'd have my back no matter what my father or his family said about me and promised to support me regardless of whatever decision I made about where I stand with my father. Now, I don't know what to do. My dad has been trying to contact me nonstop since the party. Initially, most of his texts and voice messages were him apologizing and asking for forgiveness. He said he was wrong and wanted to make things right. Then, his messages slowly started accusing me of brainwashing my grandpa and trying to ruin his relationship with my stepmother. Of course, that hurt a lot. Is there any way this man would ever choose me over his rotten wife and daughter? Sorry, that was mean, but I don't know what to do with how I feel. My dad is still asking to meet and talk about everything that happened. I don't think my dad will apologize for anything, especially after his last few texts accusing me of manipulating grandpa. But on the off chance that he does apologize, I don't know if I could ever trust him again. It's been 4 years of feeling like I didn't matter to him, like I was someone he could just toss aside. As for my stepsister and stepmom, I haven't heard a word from them, and honestly, I don't want to. They ruined my relationship with my dad and turned my life upside down. I don't think I could ever forgive them for that. So, I'm stuck. Am I wrong for not wanting to see my dad or for still feeling bitter about everything that happened? Update 1. It's been a week since I last posted here, and I've lost count of the number of comments and messages I got begging me for an update. So, here it is. First of all, thank you to everyone who commented and empathized with me. Thank you for all the advice and your criticism. It's crazy how many people actually cared about what I was going through. A lot of you told me to go no contact with my dad, while others suggested giving him a chance to explain. Well, I ended up deciding to meet with him, even though my gut was screaming not to. I don't really know why I agreed to it. Maybe I just wanted closure. Maybe I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, though I wasn't sure he deserved that. Deep down, there was a small part of me that hoped he'd finally show some real remorse and prove that he was sorry for what he did. So, I texted him back and agreed to meet at a cafe we used to go to when I was younger. I figured it was a good neutral ground. When I walked in, I saw him sitting there looking kind of nervous. It was weird seeing him after so long, especially after everything that went down at Grandpa's party. For a second, I thought maybe things could go back to how they used to be. But that feeling didn't last long. He started by apologizing, saying he knew he'd messed up and was sorry for believing my stepmom and stepsister. He talked about how hard it's been for him since the truth came out and how he feels like he failed as a father. At first, I started to soften. I thought there was a tiny chance we could at least try to rebuild some kind of relationship. But then things took a turn. He went on a long rant about how he'd been under so much pressure back then and didn't know what to believe. Which, I mean, okay, I get it. But that doesn't excuse how he tossed me aside for 4 years. Then, he actually accused me of manipulating Grandpa. He said he wasn't entirely convinced I didn't somehow stir the pot to make Grandpa turn against him and embarrass his family in front of everyone. I was so shocked by his accusation that I couldn't even say anything at first. The guy basically admitted he still didn't fully trust me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I just sat there and stared at him, trying to process how he could say something like that. All those texts about him wanting to make things right, and now he wanted me to apologize? At that point, I realized this meeting was a huge mistake. He wasn't here to apologize, at least not genuinely. He just wanted to clear his own conscience or shift some of the blame onto me. I called him out on it and told him it wasn't fair for him to put any of this on me. I reminded him that he was the one who chose to believe my stepsister and stepmom without even giving me a chance to defend myself. Instead of taking responsibility, he doubled down, saying I was being unfair to him and it wasn't his fault because they had tricked him. He even suggested that maybe I should forgive them because family is family. That was it for me. I couldn't listen to any more excuses. He wasn't sorry for what he did, he was sorry he got caught and embarrassed. I told him I didn't want to hear from him anymore unless he could genuinely take responsibility for his actions. Then, I got up and left. Since that meeting, I felt weird. Relieved that I finally confronted him and saw his true colors, but angry that he still couldn't just own up to what he did. He's still more concerned about how everything looks to the rest of the family than actually repairing our relationship. I feel like I've wasted so much time hoping for some kind of closure, only to realize it's never going to happen. To top it off, I heard from one of my cousins that my stepsister and stepmom have been trying to spin the whole situation again. They're telling anyone who will listen that I'm overreacting and blowing everything out of proportion. My cousin even said my stepsister was bragging that their side of the family is still sticking together and I'm the one isolating myself. Right now, I'm done with all of them. My dad clearly isn't going to change, and as for my stepsister and stepmom, they've done enough damage to my life already. I'm just tired of being hurt by people who are supposed to care about me. Update 2. I wasn't planning on updating again, but things have gotten wild. After my meeting with my dad, I went no contact. I blocked his number and ignored any family members who tried to guilt me into giving him another chance. But 2 weeks later, Grandpa called me and asked if I could come over to talk. Since Grandpa had been my only support through all this, I agreed. Grandpa told me he'd found some shocking evidence while going through old financial records. He'd been suspicious for a while after the watch incident and decided to do some digging. What he discovered blew everything wide open. My stepsister and stepmom had been running scams for years. They'd siphoned money from the family business, taken out credit cards and loans in my dad's name, and racked up massive debt while hiding it from the rest of the family. Grandpa found records of purchases for nail appointments, hair blowouts, and luxury items, all things my dad would never spend money on. When Grandpa confronted my stepmom and stepsister, they couldn't deny it. Grandpa decided he'd had enough. He went to his lawyer and disinherited my dad entirely. Everything that was supposed to go to my dad, including control of the family business, is now going elsewhere. A significant chunk is coming to me. As for my stepsister and stepmom, Grandpa made sure they couldn't touch a dime of family money. They're completely cut off. He got his lawyer to block them from accessing any of the trusts or family assets, so everything they thought they were going to get their greedy little hands on is gone. Grandpa is even going to help my dad sell his house so that none of them can continue to leech off him financially. They're going to be completely cut off. Oh, but that's not all. Apparently, when my stepmom found out what Grandpa had done, she lost it, and I mean a full-on meltdown. She tried to guilt-trip my dad into fighting back against Grandpa, but there's nothing they can do legally. My dad's stuck because he didn't protect his finances, and now he's at the mercy of whatever my stepmom and stepsister want to do next. And here's the kicker, my stepsister had the nerve to try and reach out to me after all of this went down. I got this pathetic message from her where she was basically begging for help because she doesn't have any money left to cover her bills or lifestyle now that Grandpa's cut them off. She even tried to spin this sob story about how she never meant for things to get so bad and that she's just been under pressure from our stepmom this whole time. Honestly, the fact that she had the nerve to text me about her struggles, when she was the reason I was out in the streets at the age of 17, made me see red. Even when she was reaching out to me, she could not seem to take responsibility for her actions and instead was blaming it on her mother. I sent her a short response, basically telling her that she made her bed and now she has to lie in it. I don't feel bad for her at all. She and her mom ruined my relationship with my dad and tried to destroy my life, so why should I care what happens to them now? Grandpa warned me that they might try to turn this back on me, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to paint me as the bad guy again. Which brings me to my dad. He's a wreck. He keeps calling and texting, but I've only responded once. I told him that until he's ready to fully take responsibility and stop blaming other people for what happened, I'm not interested in having a relationship. I can't keep putting myself through this cycle of betrayal and forgiveness, only to get hurt all over again. There's still a lot up in the air, especially with how my dad's handling everything. Part of me wonders if he'll ever fully cut ties with my stepmom and stepsister, or if he's just too deep in their lies to see the truth. I guess we'll see. Right now, I'm focusing on myself, but something tells me this isn't over yet. Update 3. Well, here we are. I wasn't sure if I'd be posting another update, but a lot has happened, and I thought it would be a good time to tie up all the loose ends. If you've been following my story, you'll know that my life has been one wild roller coaster of family drama. But I can finally say that things are looking up for me, and not so much for the rest of my family. After Grandpa disinherited my dad and cut off my stepmom and stepsister from all family money, things took a serious turn for them. My dad is in financial freefall. Grandpa wasn't kidding when he said he was getting that house sold. Turns out, he wasn't just helping my dad sell it, he was forcing it. See, Grandpa technically owns the property, and my dad was just living there under some fancy trust arrangement that Grandpa controlled. So, when Grandpa cut off all financial ties with my dad, it meant that the house my dad was living in was also no longer his to live in. Grandpa gave my dad a chance and told him he'd let him stay there as long as he kicked my stepmom and stepsister out. Of course, my dad could never turn his back on the woman who ruined his life, so Grandpa decided to pull the rug out from under them. Within a week, the house was on the market, and they had 30 days to vacate. Apparently, the news didn't sit well with my stepmom, and she absolutely snapped. I mean, we're talking about a public meltdown. She screamed at real estate agents, threatened my grandpa with lawyers, which is hilarious because her lawyer already told her she didn't have a leg to stand on, and even tried to guilt-trip my dad into fighting back. The cherry on top? My stepsister tried to get my dad to sell some of his remaining personal belongings just so she could keep paying off her car loan. Sometimes I think I dodged a bullet by not properly growing up under my dad's care, because otherwise, I would have ended up just as spoiled and shameless as my stepsister. My stepmom and stepsister found it really hard to adjust to their new life, not surprisingly. After they were cut off, my stepsister lost all access to the luxuries she'd gotten so used to. No more fancy shopping sprees or expensive trips. Everything was gone. Honestly, part of me was happy about it. I think she desperately needed a reality check, and this was a great one. And remember how she was asking me for help? Well, I haven't heard from her since I told her off in my last update. I guess she's too busy trying to figure out how to survive without leeching off my dad and grandpa's money. Unfortunately for my dad, my stepmom tried to pull one last desperate move. She filed for divorce. Yep, the woman my dad sacrificed everything for turned her back on him. Who could have predicted it, right? She figured that since my dad was now practically broke, there was no point in sticking around. She probably thought she could get a hefty settlement from him, but unfortunately for her, there was nothing left to take. Grandpa made sure that all of the assets were out of her reach. So now she's stuck with nothing. I can't say I'm surprised, though. She was always in it for the money, and once that dried up, she bailed. As for my dad? I haven't spoken to him since I told him I wasn't ready to have a relationship unless he took full responsibility for everything. And honestly, I think it's going to stay that way for a while. He's still living in denial, clinging to this idea that it's somehow my fault or Grandpa's fault for how things turned out. He refuses to see how he let himself get manipulated by my stepmom and stepsister. Until he can open up to his part in all of this, I don't see us having any kind of relationship. It sucks, but I've made peace with it. Grandpa, on the other hand, is doing great. He's been a rock for me through all of this, and we've grown even closer since everything came to light. We've talked a lot about the future, and he's made it clear that he wants to make sure I'm taken care of, especially after everything I've been through. So, yeah. I guess this is the end of the road for this saga. My dad, stepmom, and stepsister are finally facing the consequences of their actions, and I'm moving forward with my life. I'm in a much better place now, both financially and emotionally, and I have no intention of letting any of them drag me down again. It's been a wild ride, but I'm proud of where I've ended up. Thank you to every single person who took time out of their day to leave comments and help me out. I hope to come back here one day, maybe 5 years down the line, and tell you all about how much better my life has gotten. Story 2, entitled Neighbor Blames Me for His Trailer Hitting My Legally Parked Car. This happened a few years ago, and I still can't believe how entitled some people can be. I work at a group home for adults with special needs, which is a regular house in a residential neighborhood. Parking there is tricky because we have a narrow driveway, and if someone's already parked in it, the next person has to park on the street. It's not ideal since we frequently leave for errands during shifts, but it's perfectly legal to park on the street in front of the house as long as you're not blocking a fire hydrant. The incident occurred on a sunny afternoon in late June, so there were no winter restrictions on street parking. I parked legally on the street and went about my workday as usual. A while later, there was a knock at the door. My coworker answered, and it was the neighbor from across the street. He was leaving town with his wife in their truck, towing a trailer. While backing out of his driveway, he hit my car with his trailer, damaging the front driver's side wheel well. When I went outside to check the damage, he was already upset, complaining about how frustrating it is that people from our house are always parked on the street, making it hard for him to back out of his driveway. Mind you, this was the first time he had ever mentioned it. I didn't engage with his complaints. I just inspected the damage, which was bad enough to require $2,000 in repairs, and said, "Let's exchange insurance information." That's when he lost it. He started yelling, insisting the accident was my fault for being parked on the street. He refused to go through insurance and said he'd pay for the damage only if I took my car to a repair shop he knew. His wife chimed in, claiming they were doing me a favor by even telling me about the accident. Sure, they could have driven off, but that would have been illegal, so it's not really a favor. I calmly repeated that I wanted to handle it through insurance. He flat out refused, which is also illegal. So I told him I was going to call the police. At that point, he got even angrier, said he wasn't sticking around, and he and his wife drove off. The police arrived shortly after. They confirmed I was parked legally and that there was no reason the neighbor couldn't have backed out without hitting my car. The next day, they tracked him down and came back to update me. Apparently, he's a retired prison guard, and one of the officers described him as a good guy and quite nice. Of course, he was polite to the officer, but he'd been anything but nice to me. The officer even tried to convince me not to go through insurance. Seriously? Just because he's part of their club doesn't mean he gets a free pass. I stood my ground and went through insurance. My provider covered the entire cost of the repairs, and the accident was deemed 100% not my fault, so my premiums weren't affected. As for the neighbor, I'm pretty sure he received some kind of fine for leaving the scene of the accident, though I never confirmed it. At least justice was served on my end.